Good evening, everyone, and a very warm welcome to the very first Right Circle for 2021. So here's wishing all of you a very good, healthy year ahead and hoping that we'll be out of this pandemic situation soon and we'll be able to meet at our usual haunt in Rajputana and mingle with our authors up close and get all interactive all over again, which will be very normal. But here's looking forward to something as good as that. Today we have a very special trio with us. Um, I'm going to start with introducing Gayatri. I still remember the day she came to my office to discuss the book, one of the JLFs that she was attending. Now, Gayatri has over 25 years of experience in communication, branding, marketing, though she doesn't look like that. But she's the one who's headed communications at Oracle, at GE Capital, at Microsoft, and is currently the Chief Marketing and Communication Officer at Pine Labs. She's all about inclusive representation in the workplace, in the society. She's also working at a non-profit digital inclusion and promotion for traditional crafts in Orissa through a foundation that she runs called Sapta Sajya. I hope I pronounced it right, Gayatri. Question of Trust is her first book. And to add to this experience and to complete the dream team actually, is her co-author, Parul Chand. Both of them, incidentally, are from IIMC, which is where even I did my journalism from. So it took me back to those years and the crazy times we've had in that institution. Parul started her career as a TV journalist way back in 1993, and right now she's actually the founder of Bright Light. She's also done a lot of news shows for television 18, now that's called Network 18, on channels like CNBC India, Indian Business Report, which is the BBC World Service Television's first India-based production with Network 18. She's also covered politics, business news, industry, commerce extensively, and she's currently the editor-in-chief for PR Moment India, which is a digital magazine on the PR industry. So you can see that together they make a lethal duo. So I had to find someone who would actually really be way ahead of the curve to moderate the session, someone who would represent Jaipur at Right Circle. And I couldn't have looked further ahead because there was Chirag, who is a co-founder for the Sports Village and a former CEO of Chirag, correct me if I'm wrong. Can I pronounce it as KOOH Sports or KOO Sports? He's also head of strategy and M&A at Serco Global Services. Prior to that, he was working in UK with a focused consulting firm. I have known Chirag to be very attentive to detail with a crackling sense of humor, sharp, incisive, intelligent mind. Sorry, Chirag, but I'm not going to go into your educational qualifications because it will come across very amply while you're questioning Gayatri and Parul. But without much delay, I would like to also say that the Right Circle is presented by Sri Cements, and it's done in association with the Prabhaketan Foundation, SR's Women, and the Fajia Foundation, and obviously Siahi. I'm going to leave it to our three panelists for the evening for you people to talk about a question of trust, which is something that all the secrets are going to unfold. I'm not going to talk about the book because that's why Gayatri and Parul are here with us along with Chirag. Just one housekeeping request from my end. Please send your postal addresses to, and please note this number very carefully, 982912735 within the next 2 days, because we will be couriering a copy of the book to you. And with that, I'm going to welcome Gayatri, Parul, and Chirag. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So hello, everyone.
Thank you, Meeta. It's my pleasure to be here indeed with Gayatri and Parul, or for that matter, Parul or Gayatri. Actually, who comes first doesn't matter. What matters is that this book is published here. Right here, I've got it here. It's proof that I've got it and I've read it. And this is available on stands everywhere, I'm told. Not sure who goes to bookshops these days, but I think it's available on Amazon as well. Look, Mita, you caught me off guard, and I had to read this book, uh, with the time paucity. But actually, I have no regrets, and I really thank you for forcing me to do that. So let's just dive into the book first. And I thought, if it's okay, Gayatri and Parul, that I give you my, two pennies, what I think your book is all about, and then we'll go about, asking some questions. So the first point I want to make here is that this book is very lucid, it's very well structured, and it does not have a lot of buzzwords. I think that struck out. I do think actually that the audience is beyond CEOs, not just corporates and startup CEOs. I think this book can be read by MSME founders, bureaucrats. We have quite a lot of them in small towns, actually. Civil servants, public sector leaders. I think they need this book desperately. Gayatri and Parul, you need to do something about that. And even some savvy politicians, for all I care. Um, if you think about it, I mean, look where Sashi Tharoor is, right, with his communication skills. Never mind where he's ended up, but I think there is something there around good communication. Second, I found the title very catchy, A Question of Trust. I can actually see myself drawing to this book if I were at an airport bookstore. I think you have been very smart, both of you, in teasing out the audience towards this book with this title. And at the same time, I thought there is a subtle warning that to the CEOs. It is like a health warning that what I think you're trying to tell us after one reads your book is that, man, if you want to be a CEO, you better get your act together, as you have no idea what's going to hit you. This book has to be crammed by every CEOs, I think, as well. And only if you read it, I think you will see what I'm trying to say to the audience. Third, I think this book is no nonsense, no fuss. That was very clear as well. It tells us everything, bang, bang, bang. I think both of you appear to be very strong-headed ladies, by the way. And your health warning in the book, although silent and subtle, but here is something I've teased out of the book. For example, at chapter 3, you talk about listen well. You're telling the CEOs or the leaders, listen well. And the way I interpret that is that if you don't listen well, you are doomed, particularly men who do not learn from their wives. Your second chapter, the subsequent chapter, is called Message Clearly. Well, if you don't do that, you'll be ambushed by your stakeholders, particularly your secretary. There is another chapter called Drive Branding. The way I interpret that is that if you don't drive branding, as a CEO through proper communication, you'll be driven out of your chair. Be a good spokesman was another very interesting chapter, because if you are not, you'll be protested out as a jerk, I think. And finally, I thought, very, very sensitive aspect, that you need to be inclusive as CEOs, because if you're not, you'll be excluded out, and it'll hurt you where it hurts the most, I think. So I think you're giving very strong health warnings in the book as well, and that really was very interesting for me. And one last point before we dive in was that when you glance around the world of academia, and I did that, particularly in the field of management studies, there is not a lot out there in the subject of communications. There may be a few research papers here or there, but I think you have opened up a Pandora's box. And I would be least surprised that, as you go around doing the roadshow for this book, that this will become a field of intense study, and outside mass communications and advertising as well. So, let's start, and let's start with a few questions, and test my hypothesis whether I'm right or wrong, and let the audience judge. So my first question to either one of you is that what took you so long to write this book, and why on earth now? Have you identified something which we don't know? Please tell us your secret. Anyone, go for it.
Okay, so I'll take that question first. So I think what took us so long is actually the COVID slowed down the writing of the book a bit. Otherwise, it would have been out much earlier. We started writing it in 2018 when Gayatri reached out with this idea of a book that she was planning to write. And why it took us so long is I think after 25 years, we felt confident enough that we can actually say something which would not sound too crazy and not too dumb for people or at the level of CEOs. So that was the reason I think we finally had enough experience and insights to be able to offer them to the audience. And so that's how it all began. So COVID slowed us down, and it also forced us to think about communication post-COVID. So then that slowed it down a little further. But I actually think we've arrived at the right time when communication is changing completely. Over to Gayatri.
Yeah. So Chirag, thank you so much for summarizing the book and actually putting the teasers out there for people to pick it up. Like Parul said, obviously the body of work and experience that both of us have done has given us the confidence to actually make a few statements and not feel like we are completely out of our depth. Personally, for me, what pushed me to think about this book is, like you said, the lack of any books on this subject, at least with the examples from companies in South Asia. There aren't too many of those books. Some of our teachers in IIMC have written a few. But for people like me and Parul who are practitioners, I don't think there's a lot out there that we relate to. And given our experience, it made sense. There was another very personal reason why I thought of writing the book, which is that, as a professional communicator, I have been part of leadership teams in this part of the world. And there is this feeling that I get sometimes from some leaders that maybe communications is not as important as the other departments in an organization. And maybe the expectation is that you pigeonhole communications as a function to be doing maybe 2 or 3 or 5 things that people think are important for communications to do. One of them definitely right up there is, writing a press release and putting it out to the media. Communications is not about writing a press release and putting it out to the media. It's much more than that. So, there is a whole lot of science involved in communicating and building a brand through good communications, and that's the reason we wanted to kind of explore this topic. And you're right, there is a lot more to be said on the topic, and I'm hoping that this is just the beginning, and there'll be a lot of people who will follow us and write on it.
I think so. I think I wouldn't be surprised if people chase you to follow this through, particularly with your style of writing. But once again, time will test that. I would like to expand on some of these things as well, but I want to take out the big elephant in the room question here, is that this trust business, which you talk about, and which we all hear as CEOs as well. Why don't you just give us some tips? How can we intelligently invoke over and over again this concept of trust in our communications? How do we build it, and how do we exude trust? It's not very easy, it's all right for for somebody to say you need to trust me, but it means nothing. So I would like to first address that big question and have your views. And Gayatri, this time probably you can start first, and then we can go to Parul.
Yeah. So, trust is about talking to that single person who's interacting with you. It's not about, addressing amorphous mass or faceless mass of people. It is about, that one person who's experiencing either your product or your services, or who's listening to you and looking for, something to believe in you. So you'll have to, as a CEO, as a custodian of a brand, we have to first figure out who's that audience that we want to target. Once we have finalized, or in our heads being clear that, this is the audience, that is when we decide, okay, what is this audience going to want to hear from us? How will we be able to connect with that person at a emotional level, at an intellectual level, actually more emotional than intellectual level? So trust actually boils down to just understanding the audience and being able to understand what is it that drives them and what is it that connects with them. It's actually a very high level answer, but we can talk more on it.
Yeah, maybe Gayatri, you can use an example from the book really to see, but I'll get Parul to sort of answer, get her views maybe, and then we can expand that as well. I think because the title is catchy, we need to do justice on this whole topic of trust. So Parul, over to you.
Thank you, Chirag. And to add to what Gayatri said, trust actually follows a very simple thing: consistency. So trust is what follows consistency of behavior in products and services. It's also the first point of interface. I would say communication is the first point of interface between your products and services and the people you serve. So we don't realize how intrinsic communication is to being human. You cannot actually communicate even trust without make sure that your behavior and actions all follow through. So it's trust is actually, the way I look at it, it's a question. It's a collection of micro trust moments where right from the bottom to the top, you're building consistency of behavior and action, and a complete reliance of quality in your products and services, and you're communicating that constantly and in different ways. So whether it's through the CEO's behavior, whether it's through the factory manager's behavior, whether it's the last mile connectivity of the Amazon courier guy who comes and doesn't call you 10 times before finding the address, all these build micro moments of trust. So that is what is important. Secondly, there's the unconscious bias aspect, which Gayatri will talk more about in the inclusive bit of the discussion. But what happens is that we stop building trust the moment there are microaggressions. So, we automatically use words and actions which are caste related or religious related without even realizing it. So that actually breaks trust faster than anything else. So if I were to sum up, it's consistency of products, services, and behavior, which you then communicate at micro trust levels throughout the organization.
So here is another follow-on to that for you, Parul, is that, so when you, and I'm talking from my own experience here, so forgive me for that, but I feel that whether it's my product or services or whatever I want to communicate or invoke my brand, I feel that I have to contextualize to the stakeholders, and I think you've alluded to that. But when you have different types of stakeholders, you have, your internal stakeholders, be it your employees or your team. You have customers for whom this, you are there because you want to sell goods to your customers. But then you have civil society, you have regulators, you have administrators from the government, be it departments, and particularly for startup CEOs in the recent last 10 years as well. There have been a variety of issues which they've been hit hard because they simply don't trust the authenticity of the capital or the fundraise they've done. So I have been terribly confused, and I wish, I had access to you over my last 10 years as well. So how do I go about doing my job with different set of stakeholders throwing different things and challenges to me in my day-to-day lives as well? So something to sort of pinpoint on.
So if I were to explain that as a human being, different challenges are thrown to you, but your core as a person and your values hopefully don't change from person to person. but perhaps the way you explain it and interact changes from person to person. So in the same way, a company doesn't change its core values, vision, and message, but it customizes it so that it is best understood by the channel. If you're going on Instagram where young startup CEOs hang out, you can't really give them a LinkedIn type of explanation. It won't work. Maybe you have to work your message out in Instagram Reels. So what social media has done is that while it's made you accessible to everybody, it's also thrown everything at a global scale. So you have the unique talent of being micro focused and yet at scale, which is a bit of an oxymoron, but that's the way it is. So you have to customize. And the way, the chapter you mentioned, Listen Well, which is written by Gayatri, will give you all the clues and inputs you need to be able to first listen well, then customize your message for each stakeholder. And without doing that, you're going to fail.
Can you give an example, Parul, whilst we are on that? Can you give an example from that chapter in the book?
Yes. Well, it's a bit in the chapter. I'll probably let Gayatri take that chapter. It's
Sure.
something
Sure,
she
Gayatri.
wrote.
Yeah.
So over
Yeah.
to Gayatri.
Yeah, Gayatri. Yeah.
So, Listen Well is about creating listening posts, creating mechanism by which you actually understand what your stakeholders are looking for and how they are responding to your whatever you're putting out there as an organization, not just in form of communication but in the form of your products and services. So if you can create those listening posts and use your communications mechanism to actually give you feedback from ground up, that can work really well. And an example of that is, Maggie and the ban that Maggie faced. And we've talked about it in the chapter, which is about, building trust circles. So the Maggie ban, when the ban happened, they had to actually recall all the products that were out there in the market all over India, and it took them a while. It took them a lot of money to bring the product back, and then also to dispose of the product, because they didn't want the product lying around and people using it, because they wanted to, as an organization, be sure that they were completely complying with the ban. But if you look at what happened when Maggie came back, within 3 months they were back to being the #1 brand in their category. After close to a 6-month, not being present in the market. So when we asked Suresh Narayanan, who is the head of Nestle in India, as to what really happened there. So the trust building had happened many years before the ban happened. So you can't start building trust just when you're faced with a crisis or just when you're anticipating a crisis. I think the mechanism to build trust, to receive feedback, to be able to respond to the feedback should all be in place well ahead of time. And that brings me to another topic that we have covered in the same chapter of building trust circles, which is the moment of truth. And I think Parul has already spoken about it a little bit. The moment of truth is when the audience is actually experiencing you either as a CEO or experiencing your product or experiencing your service. And this could be, the Amazon delivery boy who's ringing your bell, or the Swiggy delivery person who's bringing your food, or it could be the CEO and the CFO of the organization who's talking in a public forum or in a media forum. In each one of those instances, people are experiencing your brand, and those are the moments of truth, really. So understanding which are the moments of truth for you as a individual, or you as a brand, or you as a company, and then being able to use those moments well to build trust is I think what we would advise.
Right. Excellent. So I think perhaps trust is a book in itself, right? Which is a concept around, so I think if you build the trust, you have the tools. From what I understand, Gayatri, what you're saying is that if you've done your work, early on, and if you build trust by capturing these moments of truths, then when something hits you, crisis or otherwise, you have the ability, and if you communicate well, the chances of you coming back to where you were is there. And I'm sure all of us in our own work lives would have had some crisis or the other, otherwise we won't be in our chairs. But yeah, this is a very interesting thing, and I've read your book, and you've gone at lengths explaining this as well, so I think it's going to be very interesting for the readers as well. Let me sort of bring another very important cogent point here, that what do you think, for the sake of our audience, what do you think they can learn about communication from leaders around us, particularly in India? Yeah, and perhaps give it through some anecdotes on some communication miracles which they have done, or communication disasters, because sometimes we often learn more from disasters. Oh, I shouldn't have done it, or I shouldn't have said it like this. So what can we learn, interestingly, particularly with the examples from your book? Gayatri, if you want to go there first with that.
So Chirag, I don't think there is anything called a communication miracle or a communication disaster. And I'll tell you why. The reason is that, as professional communicators, we communicate for a desired result. Now that result may be a policy change, or it may be, introducing a new technology to a new group of audience, or just telling the world at large that we are the biggest and the best in our field. Now, if we are able to communicate that and the audience has received it and understood it, then we have succeeded in our communications. Now, people might say that Donald Trump's the takeover of Capitol, for example. People blame for Donald Trump for instigating those people to do what they did. Now the question is, did he want them to do what they did? If he wanted them to do what they did, I mean, his communication was successful. But I think there is also this underlying principle of values and societal values, and what is right by society, what is right by business ethics. When you put that filter, that's when the miracles and the disasters actually happen. And Parul's written extensively about it in the book, in terms of the elections, the Indian elections, the last elections, and how successfully the prime minister could communicate what people wanted to hear, and therefore he was re-elected. Similarly, there are lots of examples of the recent COVID communication, both in terms of how various governments across the world have communicated to their citizens. The Indian government is a good example of just keeping the channels open and just keeping a transparent way of telling people, when is the vaccine coming, what is to be done when the vaccine comes. Similarly, a lot of other governments have done it as well. I would call those as good communications. In the corporate world, the technology companies do really good communications because they have to, they don't have a choice. They come up with a new technology. If the technology doesn't get adopted, obviously their business fails. So they really do good communications there. I would say, somebody like Elon Musk has done a really good job of, just exciting the whole world around this new concepts that he's bringing. So those I would say are good communications. In terms of disaster, again, if you put the filter of societal and, values, I guess the ones that kind of hurt people, the ones that end up creating a lot of angst, I would call those as disasters. Parul, do you have any examples that you want to add?
Yes. So following from what Gayatri said, of course, if it's already a disaster, your communicator has kind of failed in their job already. So, but having said that, there are some disasters which you really cannot, whatever you do, you can't really solve those, but those are extreme situations. So I think it's important to understand a little bit of the background of why, communication can reach crisis very, very quickly now in the social media age. It's because the customer, especially in India, who didn't have much power before, if you had a problem with a product or service, you kind of had to suffer it because customer service or the ability to complain about that was limited. Now, what you're seeing is the rise of what I call, the Insta complaint. So your customer goes instantly online and says something, and you have to respond. And that is what can quickly snowball into a crisis or not a crisis, depending on how you handle it. So if I were to say who are the really good communicators, Anand Mahendra is an excellent communicator, and he's very consistent. He does it only on Twitter, whether it's praising PV Sindhu for a workout, whether this lovely tweet when he became a grandfather, he said, I went to sleep a father and I woke up in the morning as a grandfather. So you get an insight into the person. He's consistent. The other part of his communication strategy, which is very effective, is rarely will you see him being interviewed in Economic Times or any of these mainstream papers. So he has decided my channel of communication is Twitter, and he sticks to that, which is very rare for an Indian CEO, to be honest, who culturally and for many other reasons don't like to be out there with their opinions. I remember his tweet when the article of, pertaining to Kashmir was abolished, and he said, I can't pretend it's just another day. So, which is a very brave thing to actually say in the current environment. So that is one. The other person who communicated really well was the Zomato CEO, Deepinder Goyal, who again is a person who directly communicates through his blogs, through his tweets. So he was actually very emotional when he had to cut back his workforce, and he said that very, very nicely. He kind of kept explaining it, and most importantly, when he brought people back and was able to restore some of the job and salary cuts, he said that too, which is I found a big lack among the corporate sector during COVID. When the news about cutbacks came, it leaked all over the place, and they didn't really try to communicate it. When they did fix it, they didn't communicate it either. So it was, it wasn't, I would say as a group, they kind of failed to communicate. If you compare that with the US, they made all these boards and bodies, and they had like a systematic response to what they're doing about COVID. But here it was very much left to individual CEOs to say things which are very sporadic. So I would call that as a failure of communication for sure. One last thing about whether communication succeeds or fails is to remember that in the current social media era, the distance between the customer and the CEO has totally collapsed. Whereas earlier you could sit in your corner office and say, okay, my sales team or my services team will deal with the problem. You can't do that anymore. You can be tagged and you have to respond. And the news cycle on social media is a 60-second news cycle. It's not a 4-hour or 24-hour news cycle. So that is the other thing which can contribute very quickly to failure in communication if you don't have a system in place, like I said. Thank you.
Yeah, so it's daunting indeed, isn't it? I was just thinking about all the tips you're giving me as a CEO, and I think you've addressed this point both through your talk here and even in your book, that I think subliminally we have a stigma around communication. As you said, we don't do a good job when we do well, we don't do a good job, and the reverse as well. And I think that's probably that stigma is that communications is something which the marketing function does, and there's somebody who's taking care of that. Whereas I think what you're saying, or what your appeal to all the CEOs, is that you need to embrace it and sort of deal with it upfront as well. So yeah, I think that's a great tip. Let me sort of take a follow on from there, Parul, and please stick with me here. Give me an example. Either from the book or from your research about an exemplary job done in managing a crisis. So whether it's a COVID or before that as well. Just give us an example of how it all started, what did they do, and most importantly, what was the data which came out of that, and how did they measure that? It'll be very interesting for us to see that, to hear from that.
I'm afraid I'll have to come back to Nestle and the Maggie ban, because their actions were so clear cut. So in the wake first of the ban, yes, they were a little slow to get off the ground in putting out statements. And Suresh Narayanan actually came, the CEO actually spoke at one of PR Moments events, and he said that trust in Maggi dropped over 80%, which is, a phenomenal drop in trust for a brand. They had, and it was a lot of that was also, driven by mothers who were saying, is this product safe for a kid? So that is something which is so intrinsic to a mother that, they had really had a big challenge to address all these issues. And as Suresh Narayanan often says, you can eat off the floor in a factory, in a Maggi factory. So they're actually very consistent with their product, but I think they took certain very clear-cut actions. Firstly, they destroyed, literally thousands of tons of Maggi packets. So that is a very clear action, and I don't recall a parallel in recent history where products at such a size and at such a cost is instantly destroyed and said, no, we're taking this all back. So that was, I think, one. Secondly, they were very consistent internally and externally, it seems to me, with their communication. They have now a helpline where people can call and ask questions and take diet tips and nutrition tips. So it's all, every possible access point for the customer has been addressed very well. There's definitely listening. And they have a CEO who talks consistently about and doesn't shy away from talking about the crisis either.
Mm.
He talks about it, says that we dropped 80%. Now, for a CEO to say that, it's a massive thing.
Mm.
So I think they handle the crisis really well, and how they dealt with it, what actions they signaled to say that we are dealing with it, how they did not shy away from addressing the issue. All of that really adds well to some great communication. And, Prime Minister Modi is another example of how he can always, communicate during a crisis really well. Whether it's COVID, you may digress politically on, and people do, on what was done. But the fact is that he was able to drive the central message of being safe very effectively. And we may make fun of, some of us may make fun of the, clapping of the plates, etc. But the thing is, it was a very, very intelligent piece of communication. It brought people together in a simple action, which is what communication is about. Can you imagine crores of people collecting and lighting diyas? And that's a very, very effective communication.
Yeah, I think in my personal life, if I were to scan an environment, there have been communications from auto companies when there was a safety issue and there's a big recall. Mm-hmm. And I think some Indian companies in the last 10 years have done a phenomenal job, and I think there is enough body of work done globally to learn from that. And I'm tempted to put this as an example out there. I think a disastrous communication message or timing was from Mr. Vijay Mallya, when he was going through crisis, and yet he had published his Kingfisher calendar, and he had he was partying around, and I think that just struck him by lightning, because it was just bad timing, bad communication, bad messaging as well. But yeah, great. And I'm sure there are a lot more things in the book for the audience to sort of think about and ponder. Let me bring another. Once again, this is a personal point here, and I've faced this many a times, that not all of us are good at language skills. And as Gayatri said at the outset as well, that, communication is just not about, issuing press release, but it is a lot more. But some of us may not be good at language skills. We may not be able to express ourselves very clearly. Are these guys doomed? What lessons can we give them? What can they do alternatively? Or how should they go about conducting themselves? What would be your message?
Communicating to build a brand or communicating to build trust is not just about speaking. It's also about doing. And, the startup CEOs, for example, who are doing their first round of conversation with investors. And if the investors come from a certain background, they obviously are exposed to a certain level of communication. I would say that, 70% of the passion of a founder gets communicated through their body language.
Correct.
And only maybe 10% gets communicated through the words they speak. 20% would get communicated through what they show them in terms of the business model and how they foresee the company going forward. I don't think communications is about language. However, there is a element of reaching out to your audience and in a way that they understand what you're trying to say. And for that, you'll just have to figure out what's the best way to do that. And I'll give you an example from the company that I work for. We have to communicate with merchants. And merchants in India are not necessarily only the large retail chains. They can be, the Hindi, Gujarati, Marathi speaking merchants who don't really care about English at all. I mean, 99% of what they do is in their local language. And if I, as a company, cannot speak to them in their own language in a way that is culturally appropriate, then they don't really care about me. And trust building is about not just speaking in their language, but being culturally appropriate as well. On Pongal, I can't be wishing them happy Makar Sankranti.
Right.
So it is, I would say, language is important, but it's not that important. And there are hacks to actually overcome language issues. So if you can't speak English in a certain way and your investor is expecting you to speak English in a certain way, take your CFO along if he speaks English better than you.
Yeah.
But, communicating is also about how you come across, how your body language is. What are you communicating? Are you telling your story in a cohesive manner or not?
Correct. Absolutely. And I think increasingly for startups, and we mentor a lot, Gayatri, here in Jaipur. And one of those things is that I can give you an example here where one very interesting startup was trying to make his pitch and he was fumbling with his English. And what we told him is that, why don't you switch to Hindi? It doesn't matter. We all understand it. And he did that, and he got the confidence, and eventually he got a big grant from Stanford University. So, we've seen examples of that. And you're right, body language, passion, the confidence, your thought process, these are also important ingredients for good communications. One other key question I had is that, in my 25 years of working experience, I've seen leaders who are silent, or I've come across leaders who carry themselves or conduct themselves in a very silent, muted way, and they go about doing their business. And then you have the flamboyant, the ever loud CEOs, and they've also done extremely well. So this is not about right or wrong, but can you draw up one or two examples in your book where you can talk about what they did, both the silent version and the loud vociferous version as well? Or what you've experienced, not through your book, but through your experience over the last 25 years in your interviews. I mean, what do they do? What do they think?
So I can, I've worked with Microsoft, with GE Capital, with Oracle, and each of these companies have had very loud, flamboyant leaders. Oracle had Larry Ellison, absolutely flamboyant, and always saying something that people are kind of talking about. And then there was Satya Nadella, absolutely grounded, speaks only if it makes sense. And if it connects with what he's trying to drive at the company. So you're right, there is no right or wrong about what kind of leaders succeed. I think what is important is if they connect with their audience. We talked about Vijay Mallya, and you talked about the timing of the calendar coming out. Now, prior to that particular incident, he was a fairly successful business leader. And even in his flamboyance, he did drive business and business value, and he grew his business. It wasn't as if, he was just sitting and running whatever he got from his father. I mean, he did grow his business quite a bit. So I think there's nothing wrong in flamboyance. If you are a naturally flamboyant person and that's how you communicate, that's all right. But if you are a naturally, quiet person, very introvert, don't try to be flamboyant, is that what I would say, because you will fail miserably. It will come across that, it's very forced. So being authentic, I think, is a very important part of communicating correctly. You have to discover your own style of communicating and what works for you.
Absolutely. I mean, another example, and I think it's in your book as well, when Mr. Narayan Murthy public spat with his CEO, Vishal. And, you had two characters of the opposite domain in a public spat. And, this was all out there and it was spicy, saucy news in the media. But I think that was also, in the end, I think the value systems won is my interpretation of that. But I don't know, through your interviews with them and the others, are there some more nuggets than what you've pointed out, so that this becomes a latch for people to sort of grab and understand?
We didn't actually interview them. What we wrote in the book was based on, publicly available material. And Mr. Murthy, of course, is known to be very down to earth. And there are lots and lots of stories of, how he travels economy, he carries his own luggage. But I think at the end of the day, it is the organizational value that actually defines how the organization responds to a situation. And that particular public spat, I would say, got grounded in what the organization felt was right for them. The board steps in and they obviously take a decision based on what they value the most. And that actually brings us to a really important part of building trust, which is clearly defining what you stand for as an organization. And I think we talked about it earlier in the conversation a little bit as well. Defining the vision, the mission, and the values of the organization is an important part of starting that journey of creating trust. Because if you have to get 2,000 people, 3,000 people, 10,000 people to align to a common culture, you have to put some basic guardrails in place. And the mission statement, the vision statement, the values, they kind of provide that guardrail. And people can then start to behave within those guardrails and do their own interpretation of, how they should be creating trust.
So let me put Parul to test here. Parul, if you are an entrepreneur selling this product, your book, and I was the investor, give me your 90-second pitch of this book. Go ahead. Let's see how you communicate.
So this is the classic, can you sell this pencil to
Exactly.
me?
Exactly.
Question.
Exactly.
So I actually don't need 90 seconds. I'll just say it in a couple of lines. Communication is so intrinsic to what you do. If you don't communicate, if you don't align your stakeholders, and now there are structured tips available in this book to do that, whether you're a startup CEO, whether you're a home entrepreneur with a cooking business, whether you're a large-scale CEO, this book can help you. And so that's my pitch. If you want to learn how to be more productive at work, if you want to learn how to build trust in a truly great organization, then this book is for you.
Excellent. Well done. Gayatri, something different from you. You're a co-founder of this book, of this company. Give us another pitch.
Okay.
Think. Because when you interview us, or when journalists interview us, they always put us on the spot. So this is my revenge.
Sure. So CEOs don't have an option but to build trust. I mean, they are the chief trust officers for their organizations. And to build trust, they have to communicate, and they have to communicate effectively. And, this book actually gives you a little bit of help in terms of, starting that journey of communicating well.
Great. And is there a sequel you guys are thinking about? Is there something more coming, do you think, so far? From what you've heard? I think you should. I genuinely think you should. Meeta, I'm not sure where we are on time, but, I think I've been on the clock. But if you want to sort of open the floor up for questions, Meeta and the rest of the team.
We can definitely open up for questions.
Yeah.
So I would request the audience to please use the raise the hand option on Zoom. I will unmute you one by one, and then you can ask your questions.
Go for it, guys. Yeah, we have a very mute audience, it seems. I think people are maybe too shy.
We have the first question coming from Amandeep Arora.
Excellent.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, I can't switch on my video. So first of all, thank you for inviting for this event, and would like to extend my congratulations to Gayatri and Parul for this wonderful book. As the topic and the cover is rightly said, the question of trust. As it's not a question, I just wanted to extend my thank you for being a part of the book. And as rightly said by Gayatri, we are not just here for press releases. The communication is more than that, definitely more than that. And while working with the startup culture, I realized how the new age companies are moving away from the thought of just being a press release driven communication and making us part of the other side of the table, be it business decisions or the product decisions. So that is, I think, need for agencies and other companies to learn, to learn that part also from the Copcom heads, or be a part of the decision making in the business. So that is, I think, the way forward for the communication too. So
are you planning to write a book as well?
Not as of now.
All right. I don't know if you want to say something, Parul or Gayatri, to what she said.
Well, firstly, thank you, Amandeep. You helped us with the CEO interview, so I'd just like to acknowledge that. She works with Policy Bazaar, which is a massive insurance platform. So I think you're right. I mean, this book, I'll just read out the dedication quickly. So we actually say it in our book that this book is dedicated to the many communication professionals who work tirelessly behind the scenes to relay the voices of CEOs to the stakeholders. So I think that's always very big part of why we wrote the book, and the communication professionals who work behind the scenes, who actually act like this 360 overview of the company. They are that's the one department who has to interact with all the departments. And it's the comms people who do that. So this book is really to acknowledge their effort.
Yes, thank you so much for coming up this idea of the book.
Thank you, Mandeep.
We have the next question coming from Ishan Arora.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for this wonderful session. Thank you, Parul, Chirag, and Gayatri for being awesome and sharing these insights with us. I have a question on something that happened yesterday, and I noticed it. The infamous Rahul Gandhi decided to do a press conference in the middle of the day yesterday. And the press conference, if you listen to what he said, didn't really, stand out for something that he said wrong or right. He addressed the right things, but parallelly, India won one of the historic winnings in a test match. And today, the whole Twitter was about his bad luck. So my question here is that, can an individual be capable of knowing the right things to say, when to say them, whom to say them to, or should CEOs invest heavily in experts and instead of grooming themselves, have experts with them lead the way?
So Ishan, we're not going to suggest that, because we've written this book and CEOs have access to this book, they should just not use expert help. I think experts are required in every field. And communications, as I said in the beginning of this conversation, does have a science behind, what to do, how to do, when to do. What is the best platform to do it, and what voices to be using, what photographs to be using, what videos to be using. There is a whole science behind it. And we would advise CEOs to actually invest in setting up a communications team that can help them. Of course, they themselves need to know what to do, but getting the experts is absolutely advisable. And there was
sorry.
no, I was saying, and perhaps there was no way for Rahul Gandhi to know that the match would become such a big deal.
Absolutely.
But typically professional communicators would look at what else is happening in the world at that point in time and plan it ahead. And I don't know if the match was on anybody's radar who was planning this. But yeah, it just turned out to be bad timing, I guess. Parul, sorry.
No problem. If I can just quickly add to that, Ishan. So there are three mega news trends which drive India. It's crime, cinema, and cricket. So if you haven't taken that into account, and now COVID is the fourth C, I would say. So if you've not taken that into account, I mean, I don't know how you could not take that into account. Secondly, it comes back to a point we're making all along, that consistency in communication. So with all due respect, this is a politician who's not consistent in the communication. He's available sometimes, he's not available sometimes. So having said that, while you need expert advice and opinion, definitely you need to fire, because you don't, CEO he can't be jack of all trades. So he cannot really sit and do each and every bit of thing. So he would need the help of his corporate communication team, his PR agency to communicate. But having said that, he needs to build his own understanding of strategic communication, because a CEO who cannot communicate in a pinch is going to fail. Thank you.
Evan, there are some questions on the chat box as well, so if you want to.
Parul, you talked about Anand Mahindra and you gave some specific examples. I think Vandana wants those examples or more.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think she wants more examples, correct.
So I think all you have to do is go on to his Twitter feed and you'll find dozens of examples of good communication. The other thing which he does very often is, if he reads about a person who's in need of something, like that girl who cycled, during COVID, he's very quick to offer a car, a help, money. Or there was this couple who was making street side food to travel the world, and he offered them money because he said, it's a great life aim to have. So he's very quick with helping money, and somehow it's always relevant to the brand. I'm not saying he purposely does it for the brand, but it always sounds very natural and very good and genuine. And then the other example I would give, which is there in the book also, that they had a LGBT employee, and that LGBT employee, after quitting, complained that the chief ethics officer actually did not treat him well, and took his sexual orientation as something to be targeted for. And he actually tweeted publicly about that, and Anand Mahindra was very swift to take action to sack the chief ethics officer and to communicate what he did later, to apologize. So it was very fast. And that is one thing he's really good at. If you tag him on any issue, and mostly he responds and he will solve the problem for you. So that is extremely consistent behavior. Does that answer your question, Vandana?
I think there's one more question which came from Minnal.
Yeah, that's one before that preceding question.
Yeah. How do you, and that's to both of you, how do you develop a sense of ownership and loyalty in your staff? So I think that gets connected to the point you just made about Anand. But yeah, please, both of you comment on this.
Yeah, I think the way CEOs have done it, and I have seen it, and as a communicator, I would advise is to be authentic, to be fair, and of course to ground everybody in the values of the organization and the vision and mission of the organization. I guess those would be the things that I would say. If everyone feels like they are moving in the same direction and they're trying to build something interesting, or they're trying to do something that will actually have a bigger impact, I think that's how people kind of feel like they're part of something much bigger than just doing their little piece of work.
So I'll quickly add to that. So my first boss was Raghav Behel, who was the owner of TV18, and he then of course sold it to Reliance later. So the biggest thing, he inspired intense loyalty and trust of his employees. We were all very young and we would work like insane hours. But the reason why we worked is that if you got up and said as a reporter that Raghav, tomorrow I want to do graphics or I want to edit films, if you could do it, he would let you do it. So he had that kind of trust and giving you a chance. So I think it all boils down to respect for the employees and how you communicate that with them. And I think more importantly, in the post-COVID era, I think employees very much want to see how you're contributing to society. And they are concerned, of course, about money. Money is very important, but they also want to work in an organization which is doing good. And that's beyond the CSR goals. It's about, how are you contributing to the problems that society is facing? And study after study is showing now that before COVID, employees would say that it's the politician's job or the government's job to do that. But now they're looking at the CEO to do that. So that's how they measure the CEO. Is he speaking out on topics which concern them? Is he giving them respect? Is he giving them flexibility? One thing which COVID has forced is flexibility of workplace. So that has actually been a massive change. And how CEOs respond to this flexibility of working will also build trust and loyalty.
So I had one question because, and it was related to COVID, and because I know during the publishing process and the editing, this discussion did happen between your editor and you both, that this whole flexibility and what COVID what the pandemic has taught us. So as team leaders, and not only team leaders, even the basic trust that we have to have on each other, do you think it's kind of deconstructed certain complex paradigms and got us back to doing simple things or take simple measures? Do you think that's working out better, even for large companies?
I think large companies are struggling with, connecting with people and creating that bond through, virtual, connect. All companies, large and small companies, are definitely struggling with that. But I think what has happened is that people are also valuing, family a lot more. Bosses are taking the time to ask, how your family is doing, is everybody okay? Do you need anything? So people have become a lot more empathetic, I would say, and that's the good thing of a pandemic like this. But I think the challenge of human connect and building trust through that personal connect stays.
Right. Yes, I think because it's been quite we've all spun around on our heels during the last 10 months or 12 months. It's almost going to be a year now. But with that, I don't see any more questions, except yes, I see a lot of people being very happy with the discussion. So
There's
thank
one question about what would you recommend to a CEO?
Oh,
I
right.
don't know.
Nikhil's question, yes. What would you recommend to a CEO if his or her trust is broken, or maybe a journalist or a PR person? Okay, both of you up for it.
Um, every journalist that the CEO talks to is not the same. If one journalist has broken the trust, that doesn't mean that every other journalist will break the trust. So each journalist has to be treated differently, and even the journalist who's broken trust, if you go back and ask that person why did they do that, maybe there was a valid reason for it. Understanding that reason could also help. I would say don't just because one journalist has treated you badly doesn't mean that you have to be afraid of all journalists.
So I have a slightly different take on that. So what are the reasons that a journalist breaks trust? It's usually because they want to rush in with a story before their competitor. That's a big reason. And you have given them, that there is an embargo, but they want to get it first out. Secondly, they have an unconfirmed story from another source. So then they break out. So you have to first define why the trust was broken. But if you're truly uncomfortable with a journalist, I would say go ahead and blacklist that journalist. There is no, stop giving them information, stop giving them access. So that's perfectly fine. And I know a lot of companies and PR professionals who do that. And for a PR person, I think the way a PR person, if they are not professional or not ethical, the way they would break your trust is by not telling you the complete story of what the journalist is, what feedback the journalist is giving you. So in that case, I think PR professionals, in my experience, are less likely to break trust. Being a journalist, by definition, means you break trust at some point, somebody's trust or the other. But a PR person has to handle all stakeholders, so it's pretty rare. But I would say that, misleading information or deliberately false feedback about what a journalist expects, and they do it in the reverse way also sometimes. They can tell the journalist that, yes, the CEO will speak, but actually they're not going to speak. So I think in that case, again, I would really say there's only one answer. You don't work with such people.
Right. I guess it's time to say our goodbyes for the evening because we are out of time now. But I can't thank Gayatri and Parul enough. And more than that, I don't think I can thank Chirag enough. I think you guys made a brilliant team and you made for a very, very productive and fruitful session. And I'm sure everyone, when they receive their copies of A Question of Trust, I'm sure everyone will resonate with what they've written in there, because it's not about just running your businesses. I think communication is a part of everyday life. It's how you communicate with your family, with your staff at home, with people you come in touch with just indirectly or even on WhatsApp. Everything can be misconstrued. So that there's a lot of learning for all of us there. But thank you so much once again, all of you, and for all our audiences for constantly being with us for every CIE event. I'm deeply grateful for your time. Thanks, guys. And do send in your addresses, please, because we need to send you a copy of the book. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Meeta. Thank you, Chirag. Thank you so much for doing this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
And thank you to all who joined in. Thank you so much.